very much. Thank you for having me, and thank you for your attendance on this cold, dark night. So I appreciate it very much, and I know there's other things going on in town tonight, so thank you. So I brought a whole bunch of stuff. I think the title of this presentation should be Cool Stuff, because I'm going to start right away with some interesting things. We're going to go in basically chronological order from over here to over there. I have access to a microphone if I need it. Are we okay? Everybody can hear me? All right. Okay. We're going to start with 1892, 1896, that area. This particular item here is called a logbook, a roll book for the Rider Lodge of the Grand Army of the Republic. After the Civil War, and then going into the Spanish-American War, a lot of veterans belonged to this organization. It was the largest organization of veterans in the country. It was national. And so, this particular rider post was in Highland Falls. And there were a lot of local gentlemen who were part of it. And we have their signatures here and the date that they joined the Grand Army of the Republic Rider Post. Some of the signatures are very interesting. And I will say that if any of these items interest you and you wish to make an appointment with me, I'll give you a pair of gloves up at the Historical Society, or if you can't do the stairs, we'll meet at the library, and you can take a closer look at these things. There might be family members of yours in here. But some of the interesting names were, first of all, Louis Goodsell. Goodsell was a state senator. He was also town supervisor. He owned the water company. He was quite an interesting gentleman. And he also was responsible for financing the building of what is now Huffman's Hardware. And it was called Goodsell Hall for a long time. It was where the Rider Post met and had their meetings and their parties and their hops and all kinds of different things that they sponsored. Another interesting name here is Gardner B. Havens, Benny Havens' son. We have Lambert Kleitz. The Kleitz family became very big in real estate and eventually developed that whole area, which is now Kleitz Avenue. And then another name here is James O'Neill, our James I. O'Neill's father. And so I just find this to be fascinating. Some people from West Point also, some officers and some soldiers from West Point also joined this group. And so this is a really, really interesting document. We also have a gigantic poster framed in the Historical Society where they had their names, their like original member roll posted on the wall of the post. So that's the Rider Post. The next thing I want to show you is a drawing by Edgar Mearns. Edgar Mearns, a local boy, his father and grandfather were here in Highland Falls as well. They owned an enormous tract of land up Mountain Avenue to the south side, a huge amount of land there. But Edgar, he didn't want to farm. He became a surgeon in the Army. He went to a local prep school here. Highland Falls used to have a lot of prep schools for kids who wanted to get into West Point. So Mearns went to one of those prep schools, the Donald Highland School, and he became a surgeon. Now I've wondered why he did not go to West Point, but he was 5'5", and I think if he had been taller, he might have preferred to go to West Point, but instead he went to one of the Ivies, I can't remember which now, but he became a brilliant surgeon. He also was an ornithologist, but he wasn't only interested in birds. he was interested in all living things, animals, plants, and certainly birds. He was right up there with Audubon and Muir, but he was a very humble man, and he was, first of all, a surgeon and an officer in the Army. And so consequently, he's not as well known as these other gentlemen that I mentioned. But Dave Baker, who's here tonight, is a bird guy, as you probably all know. And he approached me not long ago and said, you know, Ronnie, is there something we can do about Edgar Mearns? And so we are in the process of trying to get a grant to do a historic marker for Mearns, which we're hoping we can put in Memorial Park on the opposite side from the one of John Burroughs, because John Burroughs was a teacher in Highland Falls, but he was also a famous poet about nature. So these would be wonderful, wonderful historic markers to have next to each other. But this is Mearns. I think, Agnes, you might want to invite Dave to speak next spring about Mearns, because he has a presentation that I know would be excellent.
My goodness, we're going to be booked until the end of next year.
My next wonderful thing here is a high school diploma. But it's a high school diploma from 1910. And I think just the size of it and the fact that it's so carefully framed, probably from Hoffman's framing, because they were very famous for frames. Graduating high school was a big deal in 1910. Not everybody made it through high school. You were lucky if you made it through 8th grade. And so this is a beautiful, beautiful diploma from Highland Falls High School, which was actually part of a K through 12 school, but like there were 2 classrooms devoted to high school. And so this now, the person it belonged to was Jenny Carpenter. I don't know if that rings a bell with anybody. Lisa Sibley found this in her basement. And she didn't know what to do with it. So she says, Ronnie, I think you might like this. I said, oh my goodness, are you kidding? This is wonderful. So that's how I got it. And that was only a couple of weeks ago. So go check your basements when you get home, all right? All right. The next thing I have here is an original scale from the Fort Montgomery Post Office. Up until 1845, mail was priced at how many sheets of paper you were sending and how far you were sending it. But in 1845, they went to going by weight. And so all post offices up until 1980 or so had these kinds, up until like the 50s had this kind of a scale, and then they started to go electric and digital. But this one was made in 1915, and it's from the Fort Montgomery Post Office. And I just think it's the most charming thing, and it actually works. Okay. Not long ago. Pardon?
Many of that old stuff works better than the new stuff.
The new stuff. Oh, absolutely,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So, okay. Not long ago, someone came to my office with a piece of the rail from the Forest of Dean mine. Again, Ronnie, I don't know whether you'd be interested in this, but I said, oh my goodness. The mine itself was very interesting. And so I have some special notes on the mine, but I also do have a photograph here, which please come up later and take a good look. But it is of the railroad going down into the mine. This mine was in operation from 1756 right up until 1931. There was a brief period in the 1800s where it was not operational. But it went very deep down. Now, somebody might be able to explain this to me. It was 3,300 feet along the pitch. So I don't know whether that means the rail itself from the opening to the end of it was 3,300 feet, or whether it was actually that deep. I do not know what that measurement is. But anyway, it was a very productive mine. This mine produced almost 3 million tons of iron ore during the various lifetimes of different corporations who took over the mine.
Where was that?
This was out where Stillwell Lake is now, out Mine Road, which is why it was called Mine Road, and almost to Route 293. They had a whole community there. They had a school. When I was writing my first book, I interviewed Vince Julian, who was raised there. Stella Bailey also has roots down there in that area of the Forest of Dean mine. So it was a very, very important place in the history of Fort Montgomery. Oh, the City Theater. I was looking through, I have these wonderful vertical files filled with all kinds of stuff. But anyway, I found one day in a box called Receipts, this book, which is a checkbook, part of a check. The checks would have been over here, you know. It's a checkbook record from the City Theater, our City Theater, which was where the library is now. It was, at first, a vaudeville theater where in the late 1800s and early 1900s, live performers would come and put on variety shows. But then, as silent movies came out, it became a movie theater. Now, in 1924, it was expanded. They closed it down for a few months and made it into a theater that could hold 500 people, that could do live performances and movies, silent movies first. Now, I just came across this article because I thought someone might ask me when the City Theater was built, and I wanted to be able to have a date. But this is the article about the expansion. It's from 1924, obviously a copy of the News of the Highlands. But it says, regarding the opening performance, last Saturday night, the theater was reopened with Lillian Gish, the famous screen actress, who just completed her run on Broadway in The White Sister. Large crowds filled the theater, and there were lines at both the 7 and 9 o'clock performance. And the patrons heartily congratulated Pete Beckeros on getting Lillian Gish to come to Highland Falls. So this is like Taylor Swift mixed with Meryl Streep, you know? This was a big deal.
Yes.
And she had her company here putting on the performance of The White Sister that she had just completed in New York. Okay, now we're going to go to something weird. I promised you in the paper something strange, right? Yeah. Okay. This is called a poison book. From the 1930s to the 1960s, pharmacists were required to keep records of poisons that were sold to people. What the name of the poison was, how much of it, the purpose for which it was used, the name of the purchaser, the address of the purchaser, and who dispensed it. Now, these are the records of William Dyroff, who worked at a place called Dickey's Pharmacy, but then also there was Dyroff's Pharmacy after that. At Ladycliff, we used to buy all our beauty products at Dyroff's Pharmacy back in the 60s.
Everybody got their hockey gear there too.
That's right, hockey gear. Yes, you could have your skates sharpened.
Yeah, you get all your everything there.
The first day my sister told me that, oh yeah, you can get, prescriptions and get your skates sharpened as well by the same pharmacist, It was amazing. Anyway, these records I find to be absolutely fascinating, and I'm going to tell you what some of these poisons were used for. Hydrochloric acid was used to clean marble. Potassium permanganate was good for snake bites. And all of these are listed in here. You could use oxalic acid to clean bronze. Then there were other chemicals, which I won't go into all of them, but remove warts, kill ants, rats, bugs, poison ivy. There was a lot of killing going on. Some of the entries just say chickens. So I don't know if it was to clean the coops. That's what I'm thinking it was probably for. Developing photographs, cleaning your car motor or any kind of motor, bleaching wood, bleaching hair, fixing your horse's hoof. Chloroform is a spot remover. You may not know that. Or at least that's what the person who bought the chloroform said it was for. Mr. Peck, does anyone know that name, Mr. Peck? He was purchasing chemicals for experiments, chemistry experiments for both, I believe he taught at the high school, is that correct?
Yes.
And at Ladycliff. So he needed the chemicals for both of these places. I'm sorry Michael's not here. Lawrence Graber bought some kind of chemical to treat bulbs. The military police purchased iodine crystals for fingerprinting. Arsenic was sold to a taxidermist. The cadet mess bought cleaning supplies. And there were other things to remove rust. Also, in these days, people did not go to veterinarians for every little thing that was wrong with an animal. People had to put down their own animals. And so there were chemicals for that purpose as well. You could tell that, sometimes it was done to humanely get rid of a pet that was suffering.
Were there any reported mystery deaths during that time?
Yeah, I was gonna say.
No.
Or kidnappings.
Yeah, with the chloroform?
Yeah.
That's right. Yes. Very significant inventors that I know of who were from Highland Falls or who lived here. This guy was, they moved here from elsewhere, but they lived here and they worked here. One was Gilbert Smith, who invented something called the Smith carbine, which was a rifle, some kind of gun that was used throughout the Civil War on the Union side. He invented this particular firearm at his little factory that he had on Mountain Avenue. The other inventor who also transformed the entire town was Reppenhagen. Now, back in the day, you're going to be so happy you have a plastic safety razor at home. Back in the day, gentlemen, of course, gentlemen have to shave. And so this is what you needed in order to shave. You needed a straight razor, and it had to be frequently sharpened. And you needed a leather strap to sharpen it. Now, Reppenhagen transformed the razor and made it to be thinner than typical razors were. This was known as the Diamond 7 razor. And these were sold in his factory on Mountain Avenue. They were made in Germany and they were made here in Highland Falls. But even more importantly was the device for sharpening it. And these particular razor straps were made of a certain kind of leather, And then eventually they were also made with a certain kind of canvas on one side that kept your razor particularly sharp so it would never wear out. These were bought by the United States Army by West Point for all the cadets. They were common in all the pharmacies and places, and also they were shipped around the world. There was 1 week where they shipped 100,000 of these razor straps that were manufactured here in Highland Falls to various different places in the world, including Sumatra, the Philippines, Cuba, Puerto Rico, Ceylon, and Madagascar. This was called the Reppenhagen Reversible and Self-Adjusting Razor Strap, and in 1900, the News of the Highlands reported that probably no citizen of Highland Falls is more widely known than he, Max Reppenhagen. Now, the News of the Highlands also used to report a lot of interesting things that were happening to the relatively few citizens that were living in Highland Falls at the time. Maybe there were 1,000 or 1,500 back in 1918. So this particular incident that happened to Mr. Reppenhagen made it into the paper on November 23rd, 1918. Our townsman, Max Reppenhagen, was at his accustomed bath on Sunday, and he slipped and fell. He struck his forehead on a metal faucet, and it was sufficient force to cause an ugly gash over his eye. The bathtub was half filled with water, and it is miraculous he did not drown. Dr. Flood dressed the wound. Dr. Flood dressed the wound. So his weekly bath made it into the News of the Highlands. Something you might want to think about, Mary Jane, if you're looking for news.
Or somebody on Facebook will be posting about it.
This date in history.
So that was the 1920s. We're going to jump ahead a little bit, and we're going to go to...
Well, the factory, was it the same factory that the gun guy used and they
No,
used?
no, those 2 different factories. Smith made his prototype in Highland Falls, and it was produced in Massachusetts at a factory. But this is where he developed the gun.
That's not the same Smith from like Smith and Wesson, is it?
No, that's a good question. No. But his name was Gilbert Smith. Gilbert Smith. Yeah. Interesting guy. One of his biographers was working with me last year because they were not actually sure if Smith was literate. They knew he was an excellent at making things, but they had no proof that he was literate. But I had something in my files that proved that he was able to write, so it was interesting. We're going to move ahead to the 1940s, and I want to talk about the Van Zettas. At the Historical Society, we have a veterans corner. We have a veterans area with pictures of those who served in especially World War II. And we have records of other soldiers who have served as well from Highland Falls and Fort Montgomery. Our town, of course, has always been very supportive of the military, and we're practically everybody from Highland Falls High School at the time was engaged in going to World War II. Now, Bill Van Zetta, young Bill, my neighbor was his dad, but he came to my office one day with this and said, again, "Ronnie, you think you might like this?" Okay? Anyway, it's a beautiful memorial to his family. 5-star. There were 5 Van Zetta children, all graduates of Highland Falls High School, all of whom were serving during World War II. their names, and of course, I love that expression, if we say their names, they are not forgotten. And so, I have this on my notes. James, Marguerite, Anthony, William, and Joseph. But in typical Highland Falls fashion, their nicknames are also here. So, you may know them better, or may have heard of them as Sacco, Midgie, Banana, Barley, and Jojo. During World War II, there was rationing here. Actually, during World War I, there was limited rationing as well, but during World War II, I'm more familiar with it because my mother used to talk about rationing. And so we actually have in our veterans collection this ration book, Book 4, which belonged to Frederick W. Brennan. And rationing is interesting because there were several causes. Of course, I learned in school that it was because the military needed all the supplies. But it was also because civilian merchant marine vessels were commandeered by the Allies, and so they could not bring supplies to ports on the East Coast or the South, where they might normally have dropped off, you know, oil and gasoline and sugar and this and that. Also, we were getting most of our sugar from the Philippines back in the 1940s, and the Philippines were taken over by the Japanese. So one of the first things that was rationed was sugar. And sugar was rationed right up till 1947. These books were given out to families. You had to apply for a book, but it was given to you. But you also had to pay, of course, for the food. There were limits put on the prices so that merchants could not try to gouge the public. Other things that were rationed were coffee, processed foods, canned food, frozen food, meats and canned fish, cheese, canned milk, fats like oil and butter and lard, shoes, gasoline, and tires. So we also have we have 2 ration books in our collection. Okay, I have here now a menu from the Chimney Corner for afternoon tea. The Chimney Corner was also known as the Garrison House. It's right across from the pond. And this particular afternoon tea was served from 2 to 5:30. You could have a ham sandwich or a cupcake, chicken sandwich, ice cream cake, and the price was 35 cents. Now the Garrison House is interesting because it was the home of, for a while, the home of Isaac Garrison and his son, Benjamin, I believe his name was. Let me find my notes here. Garrison. Beverly. They both fought in the Battle of Fort Montgomery. They were both captured and they were both released. They were probably brought down to the city, to one of those sugar houses that Michael was talking about, one of those prisons, and then released. Next, I brought you 2 phone books. One is from 1951 and one is from 1981. And I also have one in my office that's very fragile, where the phone number was a single digit. It was back in 1915. But if you find any old phone books amongst your things as you're getting rid of stuff so the grandkids don't have to get rid of it, in a dumpster, let me know, because oftentimes people call me and they say, my grandmother grew up in Highland Falls, and I think it was, Clayton Avenue, and do you by any chance know where that, I've been able to help many people just from looking in an old phone book. So they're really great resources for historians, for local historians. This is a plate. I would like to be able to date it, if anyone here had worked at the Bear Mountain Inn. Anybody ever worked at the Bear Mountain Inn? They had this type of china, but and this one says Bear Mountain Inn on top. We have several pieces at the Historical Society, and I believe it dates from somewhere between the 1950s and the 1970s. I'm not quite sure. I'd love to be more specific. It's made by the Homer Lachlan Company. I do have dates for them. And so that's the company that actually makes Fiesta ware. But we do have a few nice pieces of that at our office. Michael Graber gave me this little treasure not long ago. When I was a little girl, I thought wearing a corsage was the most ladylike, wonderful thing a woman could possibly do. I couldn't wait till I was old enough to wear a corsage. Now, of course, Michael owned one of the huge florists in Highland Falls, and they made so many corsages for Mother's Day or graduations or Easter that they had to develop stamps to say what kind of corsage it was, because they couldn't write it out on all of the boxes and such. And so this little apparatus here, this one, for example, says white rose wristlet. So the 100 or so white rose wristlets that they had to make, they were able to stamp all the boxes really fast. Another one, oh, they're so cute. Another one says orchid, and the lavender orchid, pink orchid, so pretty. But this is a technology we don't see anymore, of course, such interesting things. All right. I have here some pictures. When the Park Restaurant closed, I contacted Rose Pozo after a while, and I said, Rose, do you have anything that I could have for the Historical Society so we can all remember the Park Restaurant? And so she gave me several photographs, and when we talked about them, she said, this was the original decor of the Park Restaurant in 1955. I said, I also have this photograph of, she had also given me this photograph of some boys in front of the Park Restaurant. I presumed they were her boys. She said, no, she has no idea who these boys are. So if any of you want to come up later and take a look at these pictures and tell me who these boys are, that would be wonderful. So we're getting close to modern times now. We're going to go to the 50s and 60s. We have cases at the Historical Society, cases of artifacts of various kinds. And I see this thing, which scares the heck out of me, actually, not long ago when I was trying to select things for you. And it turns out it came with a wonderful description. The mountainous region of the Hudson Highlands, with its many lakes and streams, once allowed for hunting, fishing, and trapping. Many a local family supplemented their daily food intake by preparing delicious fish and venison meals. Beaver and muskrat skins were also made into wearable items. One of the many mountain men in the Forest of Dean area who carried on these skills was Tony Rosselli, that is Stella's brother. And this was donated, this trap was donated by his wife, Ruth, who was my neighbor for a while. Now, I am afraid to touch any part of this. I have no idea how it works. But does anybody know of anything else that was trapped besides muskrat or beaver? Coons. Oh, yes.
Mink.
Of course, mink. Were there mink around here?
There still
Yeah.
are.
Are there? Oh, wow, interesting. Okay, all right. Now, totally different, on a different note, we have this voting machine here, this sample voting machine. Again, when I was little, my parents always took me to vote. Speaking of voting, congratulations, Rich.
Thank you.
This was a lever design, it was called, a lever voting machine. And you could practice if you didn't know how to work the machine. It has a little device here, it would reset the levers, and you could put them down. This particular machine was up in the attic of Village Hall, but it was when Tommy Murphy was running for supervisor. And there's some other names on here you may remember, such as Beverly Sullivan. So take a look at this when you have a chance, when you come up. Now, my special love, Ladycliff College. This is my favorite picture of Ladycliff. It's of a girl in a phone booth. She's waiting at the end of her dormitory. You know, she waited and waited so she could have a chance to call her boyfriend or her mommy or somebody. But I remember very, very well at Ladycliff, we had about 30 girls and one phone booth. And parents had to call you on that one phone booth, and you had to do your outgoing calls on that phone booth. And one time, one of my freshman friends at Ladycliff went to a concert, and it was the Bee Gees. And we were all in love with the Bee Gees in those days. And so she went to the concert, and after the concert, she actually met one of the Bee Gees. And so he was supposed to call her at the dorm the next night or the night after. And we were all out there in the lobby of the dorm waiting for this guy to call. And he did. Yay, it was wonderful. So we had a lot of fun. But she said, we said, Linda, you're going to talk to him. Can't you let one of us answer the phone and go, like, get you? So she says, yes. I forget who was picked. Wasn't me. But somebody answered it, and then we had to pretend like Linda was not there, waiting, you know, with a bated breath to talk to him. We counted to about 20, and then, yeah. So then Linda got on, oh, hi.
How close were the nuns to this telephone?
They lived in one of the rooms at the end of the dormitory. My room was pretty far from that. In the center lobby was where this phone booth was, at Lady Hall, at Ladycliff. It's gone now. But speaking of nuns, we were annoyed one time with our particular nun who was in charge of our dormitory floor. And so to play a horrible prank on her, we put the statue of the Blessed Mother in the phone booth. She was horrified, absolutely horrified. We were in tremendous trouble. We all had curfews of like 1 o'clock in the afternoon for the next week. Oh, those were the days. They were strict. Speaking of Ladycliff, though, this was from the very last catalog of the Ladycliff. Is there a bottle of water around? No. Thank you. 1980 was the last catalog printed. And Gina Rose, I believe, in the front row here. Were you in the last class to get diplomas from Ladycliff?
Yeah, that was 81.
Mm-hmm. 1981. I have a copy of Gina's diploma hanging in the Historical Society in my Ladycliff exhibit. But also, when the current public library was being renovated from a small brick building to the beautiful white masterpiece that we have now on Main Street, the architect was looking for a design for the railing in front of the library. And he said, can you show me some vintage pictures of other buildings around? And he happened to be looking through some pictures of Ladycliff and found this design of the altar rail. And he picked that design, he loved it, and that is the current design of the railing in front of our library. An old one. But I wanted to talk about two street names. One of them is Cozzens Avenue, and the other is Burrard Place. Cozzens Avenue was named for the Cozzens family. The first great and major landowner was William Cozzens. William Cozzens' estate consisted of everything from, now think of where Cozzens Avenue is now, all right? We're going to go up Cozzens Avenue. Everything from the river to the top of the mountain over to the border of West Point. That was Cozzens. In fact, in 1871, right before the merge with, or right before we broke from Cornwall, Cozzens proposed to the state that this should be called Cozzens, New York, not Highland Falls, New York, or Buttermilk Falls, or anything like that. And he had reason to back that up, because on the maps going up the river, the Dayliner stopped at Cozzens Dock. People went from Cozzens Dock to Cozzens Hotel. And it was an empty tract of land, pretty much, before it was developed, and it all belonged to Cozzens. He was a very, very prominent man. He also sold off some pieces. One was to the Methodist Church, and one was to Holy Innocents, and one was to Sacred Heart. And as each church was built, it was built a little higher than the one before it. Now, insofar as Burrard Place, I have a book here. It's a fairly recent book, but one of the people that it talks about in this book is Grace Burrard. The book is called The Widowed Ones. Grace Burrard was a young woman here in the early 1800s. She grew up here in the early 1800s, and she married Lieutenant Harrington, a graduate of West Point. And Harrington was out in the Dakotas with Custer. And Grace, like many of the wives of the young lieutenants, actually went with him to these various posts where there was danger from the Native American conflicts, etc. But Grace, even with one child, followed her husband out to the Dakota Territory, and then he was in a division or a group, I'm not sure of the military terminology, but it was cavalry, and he was in the group that was supposed to rendezvous with Custer's men. And, no, pardon me, he was with Custer. Rowe is the one that had to rendezvous. Harrington was one of Custer's men, and at the famous battle there at Bighorn, he was killed, we think. But all of Custer's fellow soldiers were identified except for Harrington. His body was never positively identified. So Grace never had closure insofar as whether her husband died or not. And this haunted her. She came back to Highland Falls. Her father owned a big house on the top of what is now called Burrard Place. There are apartments there now by the gas station. But Grace lived here for a while. She actually had a second child, and then she left them in the care of her in-laws and went out west and disappeared for a while. And they presumed that she was looking for her husband. She was found somewhere in Texas one day by some people who saw this woman wandering around. She had no recollection of where she had been or what she had been doing, but she was eventually reunited with her family. Her story is in this book. Now, Siobhan Fallon is currently writing a book about the 7th Cavalry, and is going to include some stories about Grace in that book. So she and I have been talking lately. All right, we're getting to the end. This just fascinates me. It's a summons book from 1998, but it has carbon paper. My last year of teaching was 2020. I had to explain to my students what carbon paper was. I had to bring it in and show them. This is how we used to have to make copies of stuff. But anyway, I have about 12 of these in my office from James Storms, who was a patrolman. And if you ever want to find out if any of your relatives were speeding through town, I can show you some more of these books. The last thing that I can identify for you is this pad from O'Neill High School for any kind of game that required you sitting on the cold bleachers. But the fun part of this is the ads on the back. It must be from the 60s because I was at Ladycliff in the late 60s, and all of these places were still in business then. And some of them were, Rafferty's, Ed's Barbershop, Hither Hill, Copold's Fashion Shop, so Joseph's Restaurant, the Teepee. So this is just a little memory thing, you know.
I'm thinking 70s because
70s?
it's Exxon instead of Esso.
Oh,
Yes.
yeah, good idea.
Right.
Oh, it might, yes,
That changed
70s.
probably in the 70s.
Okay, yeah, that would be more accurate. This is good. See, I need information.
I just want to see Port Perry's restaurant.
Of course. The last picture I have, I don't know what it is. I haven't got the faintest idea. So I'm hoping somebody can tell me. John Blanc found this. Now, it is a group shot of 29 women and 4 men. It was found in a basement in Fort Montgomery. The basements of Fort Montgomery are just gold mines for historians. Gotta go to more basements. I cannot figure this out, and I was hoping somebody could say, oh, I think that's my grandmother, or whatever. John Gonza, years ago, said to me, you have to learn how to look at a picture, Ronnie. You have to learn how to look at a photograph. Got to get your magnifying glass out, and you got to pay attention. And so when I got my magnifying glass out, I noticed that a lot of these women have a ribbon on. So I'm wondering if this was a group of suffragettes with some friendly male, partners or whatever, or a temperance meeting, and I can't think of anything else
Well, it
that
could
it
be
might be.
something like Eastern Star or the Catholic equivalent, because they had men from the fraternal order they were affiliated with that were on that board.
Oh, that's a good idea, Farabee. That's a good idea. Yes, Eastern Star or
What is the Catholic equivalent?
Yeah, Catholic Daughters.
Catholic Daughters, Rosary Societies. Yeah, oh, that's interesting. That's an interesting idea. So, please take a moment, come up and get a closer look at any of these objects. But I have a very important announcement for you before I close. The Historical Society has members, and the members contribute to help buy things. For example, bubble wrap for all these things that I have to bring back tomorrow to the Historical Society, whatever. But as a town historian, I am most interested this coming year, the 250th birthday of our country, in expanding the membership. I'm more interested in that than I'm interested in money. And so, for 2026, the cost of becoming a member of the Historical Society will be 250 cents. That's all you have to give me. I don't want any more than that. So, I'm going to leave these membership things here, membership, and should you desire, please grab one. Basically, it asks for your name and your email and your address. If you feel uncomfortable giving your address, that's fine. What I basically need is, if you wish to support the Historical Society, your name and your email. Because I send out various updates about other historical things that are going on. Next year, there'll even be more. The Fort Montgomery Battle Site will be joining with me for a couple of things and doing some things on their own. We work very closely with the Woodbury Historical Society and Alex Brisgintis, who is their historian. He's got a great event planned for April. And so if I have your email, the updates will come to you about these various events. And also occasionally I need help doing something, or some kind of task, or a committee of some kind. But there's no obligation to ever do that unless you have the time and wish to do it. So, anyway, in conclusion, thank you very much for your kind attention. And,